come on up. And I think the process is, Lisa, what's the process?
You're going to have 10
How many
minutes.
You have 10 minutes?
Is it 10 minutes for like the last time, or
No, it's going to be, it's going to be a New York City 10 minutes. Not an Albany 10 minutes, New York City 10 minutes.
I'll try to do my
So the clock is running.
Thank you very much, Senator Sampson. I appreciate your integrity and Mr. Adams' integrity. I'd like to start off by quoting Mrs. Carvel, who was at the June 8th hearings, who said that the surrogate court system of the state of New York was a criminal enterprise, or she said it was a criminal empire. Either one would be correct. I believe that she had obviously lost $100 million or $150 million when somebody looted her estate. I believe additionally hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, are being drained from the economy of the state of New York and from the people of the state of New York. And I detect an emphasis on taking the homes and property of black families in the state of New York on top of it. I'd like to also invoke Catherine Wilson, the investigative reporter, super accountant par excellence from the Westchester Guardian, and I would like to invoke the New York State whistleblowers law on what we can reveal would save the state of New York probably hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen assets or looted assets from the honest and legitimate families of the state of New York. Presently, at this time, at this moment, part of a group of forgers are living in a home paid for with money looted from my uncle's, my agent uncle's bank accounts before his death. In addition, my Aunt Genevieve Corridon, who is still alive at 99 years old, bless her little heart, had her trust fund looted, which was contained within my uncle's will, a will that was proven to be a forgery, and an uncontested forgery at that. And she would like her trust fund returned before she dies. She's 99 years old at this moment. My uncle died.
Who looted the trust fund?
Huh?
Who looted the trust fund?
I don't want to say at this point. It's apparent in my paperwork that I've given to you.
Okay.
Okay. My uncle died in December of 1999. When we finally got a copy of my uncle's will, it was noted that it was not the will that my mother remembered. My mother is the sister of Charles Maxwell. When we looked at the will, we saw that my uncle had made a glaring error to the will. He made his dead mother an executor to his will. She died 30 years before. He paid for the funeral. He was at the funeral. Okay? He did not make a mistake in the will. Our family knew my uncle was a very exacting man who have never made such a glaring error. We could not understand why the surrogate court judge insisted over our protest that he knew our uncle better than we did, and insisted that the glaring error was a common error of my uncle. Really? I don't think so. We could not understand why the judge and the lawyers were in such a rush to fast-track my uncle's will through his court. We could also not understand why the judge kept allowing the opposing law firm to resist and break years of the judge's own court orders to provide an estate accounting. To this day, we don't have an estate accounting. Mrs. Catherine Wilson, a forensic accountant of superior grade who worked for the Rockefeller family, said you couldn't make heads or tails of what they gave us. Okay? During the time of a deposition, the opposing lawyers gleefully pronounced that they had created my uncle's will. With the glaring error in the will and the rush to push it through the court, the refusal to comply with court orders by the attorneys to account for the estate assets, a national forgery expert was hired by myself To our shock, the will turned out to be a stone-cold forgery. Okay? Now it becomes apparent the reason behind the glaring name mix-up in the will listing a long-dead relative as an executor. I don't know. Do you think a dead relative in your family could manage your estate? I don't think anybody could believe that. But they managed to believe that in Nassau County. The forgery also revealed the motive for the breaking of court orders to account for the estate assets, including my uncle's expensive two-story home in Woodside, Queens, sold via a forged will, a uncontested forged will. Because my uncle's home was located in Queens, we took the forgery report to the Queens DA in charge of professional conduct. That DA did a grand jury investigation. The investigation included the law firm that created the will and other court officers. The DA told us she believed the origin of the forgery and the crime started in Nassau County. The Queens That DA told us whoever did an investigation of the Charles Maxwell forgery estate theft would open up a Pandora's box of forged wills, forged deeds, forged accountings, and mostly forged accountings in New York State. My lawyer and I thought that the DA from Queens was telling us about the Nassau County. She was not. I have to reiterate what Mrs. Carvel said. The surrogate courts of the state of New York are a criminal enterprise. She was right. The Queens investigation file was passed to Nassau, where it disappeared. Okay? 3 years after my uncle's death, and in clear violation of New York estate law, we could not get an accounting of the missing assets, which were looted from my uncle's bank accounts before he died. An August morning in 2003, the opposing lawyers are required to finally produce the estate accounting at 10 o'clock in the morning. For 2 hours, the opposing lawyers failed to show with the accounting. In those 2 hours waiting for the lawyers and the accounting, the Nassau court called me 4 times telling me to take $40,000 and a gag order to sweep this growing mess out of this court. I believe that $40,000 was an admission of guilt, and they wanted me to take a gag order. We came to this court not to be bribed into silence, but to find those who forged the will and where all my uncle's bank accounts went and vanished, and a particular item which Mrs. Catherine Wilson and I will be indicating to you might produce hundreds of millions of dollars in missing funds from the state of New York, and that is vanishing returnable security deposits due back to estates, but through mishandled accountings, and I'm being generous here with that word, those returnable returnable security deposits appear to be vanishing, amongst other things. At 12 noon, court is canceled because the opposing lawyers don't show, and now we're out in the hall. And the outside of the hall is a court of no record. Suddenly and miraculously, the opposing attorneys show up with an accounting that Mrs. Catherine Wilson says you couldn't make heads or tails of. We're forced to accept it. The court tells us that we have to take the accounting because the court officer just got a call that the judge insisted we take the accounting. Well, I just walked out with him. How in the world was that possible? The guy was 30 seconds, in a 30 seconds move out of the court into the hallway. He made no phone calls and received no phone calls. How did he know? It was a setup. The accounting was non-accounting. And at this point, I would like to read a little statement about the law. When one conveys a false impression by disclosure of some facts and concealment of others, such as the concealment in effect is false representation, that what is disclosed is the whole truth. We had an accounting that didn't account for anything, okay? false representation. I'd also like to read that this is from Black's Law, an intentional perversion of the proof of the truth for the purpose of inducing another into reliance upon it with some valuable thing belonging to him or to surrender some legal right. That's fraud. Okay? We were presented a fraudulent, uncontested fraudulent will and a fake accounting, deliberately concealing material evidence. Okay? Out in the hall in Nassau County, promises about it.
Try to wrap it up in 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. We had to do an appeal. We submitted an appeal of the judge's decision against us, okay, after telling us that we would have a trial. He promised us that we would have a trial and an accounting. And we were not allowed that promise, okay? I had to do an appeal. We submitted the appeal in 2004, and we were told, my phone calls, my paperwork from my attorney, all through 2004, that the appellate court had not made a decision. We called all through 2005, and we were told by the appellate court that no decision had been reached. We called into 2005. Mind you, this is over and over, and I have letters to prove it, that there was no decision reached on my uncle's case. In the spring of 2006, I called the appellate court again, and I'm told that a decision was reached in 2004. Basically, gentlemen, somebody's lying. And I have the paperwork to prove that we are not. Okay? After that point, I had to go to OCA. I don't even want to tell you what happened there, but I was followed by an Asian person on several occasions because of a critical piece of information that Mrs. Catherine Wilson and I believe will reveal hundreds of millions of dollars being looted from the accounts of the state of New York and the decent families of the state of New York, and that is returnable security deposits. I was followed on several occasions, and only the office of...
What do you mean by returnable security deposits?
When you send a person into a nursing home, thank you for that question. When you send a person, an elderly person, into a nursing home in the state of New York, you have to come up with about $30,000 returnable security deposit. If that person dies or if they move to another state, okay, the average death rate in a nursing home is about 100 people a year. Now, if that $30,000 does not come back, that's about $3 million if there is fake accountings that are brought into court, okay? So now you have 30 times 100. That's about $3 million. Now, in Rockland County, we have a number of nursing homes. Let's just say it's 10. Now you're looking at $30 million. Now multiply that by the number of nursing homes in the state of New York. And if fraudulent accountings are being brought in, the courts of the state of New York are being turned into laundries for criminals. Understand? I think you do. This is a serious crime. The state of New York is being
the returnable
looted.
security deposit is what...
should be coming back to the state.
But it is given to the nursing home?
Well, that is supposed to be provided in an accounting when the case goes to a surrogate court.
So who pays the $30,000?
The person that may put the elderly person in. A lot of times it's private pays, and these are sometimes the victims here. But somebody is looking for people that don't have any relatives around that may own. Well, look at Mr. Garfield Gillings, a black artist from Brooklyn. He's still trying to get his apartment, his place back, and all his paintings were robbed. I could list you a number of black families, Mrs. Acosta, Mrs. Murdoch, I think her name was, the 3 women from Queens who were living in their homes, black widows, and their homes were sold out from underneath them by the clerk of the court, who was a CPA. This is Jonathan Demick's brother. Okay, he was in the Post. I'm not making it up. I think I've extended my time, but I think you got my point.
No, definitely, Mr. Rose. You have extended your time. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Rose? We've been joined by my good colleague, Reverend Diaz from the Bronx.
Oh,
Reverend?
Pleasure to meet you, Reverend Diaz.
Let me ask you a question about those $30 million that you just said.
Yeah.
Why do you think that